Welcome to the All Application webcast series. My name is Christine Morris. I will be your presenter today. I am an Altium product specialist with GoEngineer. And for those of you that were fortunate enough to go to our Race to Production events, you may have seen us build this robot here on my screen. Today we're going to expand on that, and specifically with the printed circuit board design. It was created in Altium Designer, and it is the top portion of the robot. If you have sat in on any of the other webcasts that are going on today, or if you want to see those that are presented in the afternoon, please go to our GoEngineer website and click on the link for that event, and you'll be able to participate in it. Our agenda for today is the Altium demo, which will take about 25 minutes. Then we'll open it up to question and answer session. We will be on mute during the presentation. However, at the end, we'll open it up and answer any of those questions that have been asked. The Altium topics that will be covered are: we're going to create an Altium project, we're going to add reuse snippets, we're going to show automated ECO, we'll place components in a 3D enclosure, and then we'll auto route the PCB and generate the Gerber files. Once that is done, we'll document the project using an output job and show how to use supplier links within the Altium Designer tool. There are quite a few things that we want to accomplish today, so let's go ahead and get started.
We'll go right into our presentation. So here I have the Altium Designer. We're going to begin by creating a new project. In order to do that, you go to your File, New Project, PCB. From that point, we're going to add a new schematic. Because we want to go ahead and start our original design. In Altium Designer, it's a unified platform, meaning all of the editors actually are connected together. So it allows for a lot of automation to actually be part of the process. I'm also going to add existing libraries. And that's important for what we're going to do today because we have so little time. We want to make sure that we have all of those individual items already intact. We won't be actually showing you how to create any of those libraries. So we want to make sure they're added to our project before we begin. And I'm just choosing each of those. And let me go ahead and find my schematic one. I believe I already added that. And let's go into our PCB. So here are our libraries. Now in the Altium Designer, we can go ahead and begin our project. If we want to go and save our project, which is typically a good idea, especially at the beginning of your design, to make sure you can go back and locate that. First, we will name the file robot, and we will save off the PCB document. Once that's done, we'll go ahead and save our schematic sheet. Again, we'll name that robot. There are different types of documents, so there won't be any confusion on what you're saving off. And we also have our final project itself, which is the container of all your source documents, libraries, any documentation that you would actually have within the Altium Designer platform. So now that we're beginning our design, you can see my blank schematic sheet on the right. I'm going to go ahead and use a few of the snippets or items that we call reuse items in Altium Designer. It makes it really easy for you to begin your design, and if you already have known blocks that you're constantly using as a reuse item, you can create a snippet, and then at that point in time, it's all wired up for you, and all you have to do is go ahead and place that on your schematic, and essentially you will be able to create your design very quickly. It's very, very handy. Like I said, if you have, say, a power page, or maybe you have peripherals that you're constantly using, you can go ahead and make your snippet right from those schematic sheets, and you can even do full schematic design sheets if you choose. And let me just go ahead and add one more, which is my header, and you can place these however you choose. I'm just kind of using up the space that I have. Now, at this point, I basically have just created a schematic literally within a minute. And you can see I have all the different areas. I have my LEDs, I have my actual MCU or that is going to control all my logic. I have all my drivers, and I also have a header that's going to go and connect out too. So at this point in time, I want to go ahead and I want to compile my document. In Altium Designer, it's important to compile to see if you have any electrical or wiring errors. And if I do, then it would go ahead and in my messages panel, it would appear and it would give me any of the known issues. At this point in time, I'm just going to expand my messages window. It says compile successful. So at that point in time, I'm going to go ahead and I want to make sure that I don't lose that information. So I'm going to save my schematic document. It's all wired up. After I save it, I'll just do a save all here. Then I can push that information to the printed circuit board. And at this point in time, it's really important. Once I go ahead and do this, you'll notice a dialog will appear. It is the actual engineering change order, which gives you each of the components that are going to be pushed to the PCB. And then once they're there, I can begin placing and routing that. Say I'm not sure if all those changes are valid changes that I want to go ahead and process. At that point in time, I can click my Validate button. I can even report those changes so I can actually go back to those at any point in time. But once I execute that, it automatically will push all those components, and you can see green on my right-hand side of my screen, over to the PCB. And let me just go ahead, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see all the components that then would be placed on my physical board. The black shape is my PCB, and a lot of people are now having to interface with their mechanical engineers. Altium Designer is unique in the fact that it will allow you to bring in mechanical enclosures or, say, an outline of a PCB that might be dimensioned by your mechanical person. For example, if I go ahead and I place my 3D body, this is basically going to bring in a step file that was created in SolidWorks and bring it right into the Altium Designer software. And I'm just going to change my rotation here because I want it to come in the right item. And I'm going to select that PCB step file that was given to me. Once I've done that, and notice that my X, I need to do that after I select my file. So I'll go ahead and change those back to 0 here. And I'll click OK. Once I've done that, you'll notice a hash type portion on my screen, or a square box. Because I am in the PCB editor in 2D mode, it will always appear as a hashed box. When I go into 3D mode, however, let me just go into 3D mode very quickly, you'll see that that takes on that exact shape that I'm needing my PCB design to be in. At this point, I can go ahead into my board shape. I can define it from that actual step model. I select the model, and then I'm going to choose the face as top. Once I've done that, notice now it's in that exact shape. So I can adhere then to all the dimensions that have been given to me from my mechanical designer. At this point in time, I'm just going to go back into 2D mode because you can see that the components are placed way over to the right. I just want to draw those back in. And I'll go in and change back my viewing so we can see it a little bit better. And I'm also going to bring in an enclosure that was created in SolidWorks as well. And this is basically what I need to fit all my components for the height and width into. And if I go ahead and embed that model, and again, it's the full assembly of what I will be creating, I'm going to create my rotation so it comes in properly in the right orientation, and we can see that well. I'm going to just place that right next to, and we can even bring it up top here. It doesn't really matter. And at this point, I'm going to go into 3D mode. Here you can see that is the enclosure that is going to fit around that physical PCB. And let me change my opacity so it's just a little bit lighter and transparent. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to drag that right over. And you can be as exact as you want to be when you're actually aligning these enclosures. You can add snap points so you know if the alignment is perfect. But in our case, for demonstration purposes, we're not as concerned with that. And in everyday design flow, you most certainly are going to really zoom in and make sure. At this point in time, now that we have that visualization of where that 3D model exists and where we need to place our components, I can begin taking those components and go ahead and immediately drop them in. And again, we're in 3D mode, so all this placement is taking place within the PCB designer. So when I'm finished with my PCB, and let me just align that one more. You can see that the design rules, when you do your final DRC, there will be vertical constraints and horizontal constraints that you have actually placed in the design rules that it will actually adhere to. So say, for example, you have components that can only be, 10 mils in height, or in this case, a horizontal clearance, they have to be at least 10 mils apart for spacing. I could go ahead and set up a design rule right within Altium Designer, and at the end, when I'm done placing everything, I run my final design rule check, and it will show in bright green all of those collisions or errors or things that I need to check. This is basically a check and balance built into Altium Designer to allow you to see that prior to going out and fabricating either the enclosure or your physical printed circuit board. So you can see how valuable this could actually become in your design flow and shorten that design cycle as well. There is no more of that back and forth passing the files between your electrical and mechanical engineer. You essentially bring in that step file, preview it, place your components around it, and then you can begin routing your PCB and continue on with your design just as you do in any other process. Since there's not a lot of time in our demonstration today, I'm going to not go ahead and place all the components that are out to the right that you see on my screen. I'm going to actually change over to one of the PCB documents, exact same one, however, it has all those components placed. And you can see, just because they're placed, you still don't see any of that routing taking place. At this point in time, I'm going to go ahead and go into 2D mode, and now you can see that visualization again. This is the exact same board, all the components placed, but now I'm going to go ahead and auto-route it. And Altium Designer has a built-in auto-router. You can set up design rules. It will adhere to every one of those that you've already stated. This takes about 1.5 minutes, but you can actually see that design process and that design flow and how Altium Designer will go and analyze each of those nets and allow it to be routed. So as we finish up here, you can see this is built into the Altium Designer. That's one thing nice about the unified platform environment. You go to each of your menu items, and immediately, depending on which editor you're in, it will invoke those commands that are available for you within that section of the tool. So that makes it really, really nice, especially when you have, critical timelines that you have to complete. You're not having to export those files out, then pass those to a mechanical or an electrical person. You essentially can do that process right within the Altium Designer tool. And here it's just taking, as you can see, the RAS nets are actually shown here in white. And it's finding if there's any contentions at the end of this auto route, it would go ahead and let you know, so many contentions were found. And at that point, you have the option to either try and auto route that again and bring in more passes, or you can actually go through and you could have manually route those couple of nets or what have you. But again, this is a part of the tool that most people, they don't have the time to manually route, or you don't want to send that out of house. Altium Designer has it built right in for you. And we'll just allow this a couple of more seconds. You can see on the left-hand side of the messages panel, there's 84 of 86 routes that are now completed. And at that point in time, once this is actually done, if it takes too much longer, we'll continue on. But I just wanted to give you a good visualization of what the tool actually can do for you. And then we'll go ahead and we'll look at the physical PCB that has been routed. We'll generate those Gerber files, and then we'll do our output job for that documentation that every design needs in essence. And you can see all the placement, you can lock down pre-routed or manual routes that you might have that might be a little thicker than others, and that will allow you then to keep going with your actual manual routes and not be disrupted at all. And here you can see the routing has now finished. Again, it was only a couple of minutes, a very small board. If you're not liking how it routed that board, you can go in and you can manually unroute the certain nets. Not a problem. Altium Designer lets you continue on with that. And once you're finished there, then the next step is basically now it's time to create that documentation or generate those Gerber files that would be sent out for fabrication. In this case, it's a simple file menu and fabrication outputs and generate your Gerber files. You'll turn on all your layers because you want to make sure that each and every one of those are sent off. When you actually go out to fabrication, your design house is typically going to ask you for your Gerber files and your NC drill files. You want to make sure you have your outline is consistent with the board so they know how to actually create that. And all the drill drawing plots are there. So let's click OK. Once I click OK, it'll immediately generate those Gerber files. And I don't know if you noticed, but now we are in the CAM editor. It is yet another editor within the Altium Designer tool. By a click of a button, it immediately brought me into this. This is basically where I can see all of my layers. And this is the actual copper. And I'm just going to turn those off for a moment so you can see them one by one. So this is my outer layer, or excuse me, my top layer, and the blue is my bottom layer. And at this point in time, if I needed to make adjustments even to the copper, I could do that right here. And you can see all the menu items. There can be post-analysis reports, design fix checks. Everything can be included in your CAM editor as well. Most of those items that you do post-design have been brought into the PCB editor at this point for the Altium Designer tool to speed up that process and that flow. So one other thing, now that we have our Gerber files generated, we're done with our PCB design essentially. We want to make sure we have our documentation to support that as well. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add a new output job file for this as well. I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to bring it into my project. I want to do a file save all because I've modified a lot of my design. So it'll go through and it'll save each of those documents for me, my Camtastic documents, my job file. Once that's done, notice here now I can create my documentation based on what I need. If I had to add netlist, you can see all the examples of netlist. If I had to export those, I could go ahead and add my 3D prints of this. I can do my assembly drawings. I can go ahead and add my fabrication. If I wanted to add my Gerber files to that, I could add my drill files, my power planes if I was concerned about that and what was included in those, my reports, my bill of materials, a very important part of your design can be included. The great thing about an output job in Altium Designer is you set this up once for any given project, and once that is configured, then you can go ahead and add that to any future design. So you're not constantly going back and completely reconfiguring the documentation for each and every design you do. So it's, again, almost like one of the reuse items within Altium Designer. On the right-hand side, these are all the containers that you have as an ability to create that documentation. You can either set it to a PDF format, and all you do is click on the radio button, and it will automatically draw that arrow. If you have a folder structure, for example, and you need to share those files, you can go ahead and pass it to a cloud server. You can go to Amazon S3, an FTP site, a local folder structure on your internal to your corporation. So you control what that structure is. And you can also, if you have to go ahead and physically have a print of those, most certainly you have that capability as well. So any one of these options are available to you, and you configure those once. The one other thing I wanted to share is within Altium Designer, they have supplier search and links that are available to the customer base. Say, for example, you wanted to search, and I'll just delete this for a moment, and go into the suppliers. Altium has now partnered with 6 different suppliers: Allied, Arrow, DigiKey, Farnell, Newark, and Mauser. Say, for example, you've negotiated pricing for any one of those suppliers out there. You could go ahead and on the right-hand side, on any one of those, you can put in your username and password, and that will give you that exact data that you've negotiated when you actually generate your bill of materials from within the Altium Designer. So say, for example, and I'm just going to take this component, and I'm just going to copy an Altium Designer. It's very well known that the comment is always the manufacturer, vendor. That's how they do their library. And in my supplier search, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do a search here. I'm just going to put in that same one. And notice how it's dynamically updated as I went ahead and copied that in. This is basically the supplier search engine going out to the vendor sites, DigiKey and Mouser, and you can see all of the different suppliers, and it picks up that data for that specific component. I want to go ahead and add that to the part that's in my schematic. All I do is click on that, and once I click on that, if I open that up, I can see that supplier information already added to my component. So that information is brought right into Altium Designer. Not only that, if I go ahead and generate my bill of materials at this point in time, you'll notice, and I'll go ahead and I'll just enable on the right-hand side, you'll notice once I go down to my suppliers, and I want to do my supplier, I want to look at the stock, I want to see the unit price and the subtotal. So over to the right-hand side, and I'll just expand these a little bit so you can actually see what they're reading. This is the stock that's available for that particular item that I did my search on. It went out to the DigiKey website, gave me that volume that is available. I said $1.63 per item. And say, for example, I had to create 200 of whatever this product is going to be. And I wanted to go ahead and know that pricing and the availability. Immediately, it will populate, and it will give me a subtotal of that exact number for that component, and that gives me my design to cost analysis. I can run my bill of materials at any point in my design. If I want to make sure I have budget before I even start into something, I need to verify that. And, you might have to go in and talk to your boss about, do we even have a budget? If you run this bill of materials, here's your documentation to support that. And it's live. It's a real link. So it's up to date. You can even pass it to your procurement department, and they can go and start purchasing those components. So you can see how valuable this actually can become. Again, streamlining processes and automating some of those simple things that are day-to-day can really improve and get that product to market much quicker. Overall, that was our demonstration that I really wanted to share with you. And just as an overview, I wanted to show you how you would create a schematic from scratch in Altium Designer. Go ahead and update with an automated engineering change order process. Once that was done, we could bring in the mechanical, dimensions for that PCB design that it needed to adhere to, and then place our components within that mechanical enclosure that was built in SolidWorks and imported into the PCB editor. At the very end of it, we were able to create our Gerber files so we could send those off to the manufacturer. And not only that, we had all of our output job documentation, including any of the items that you could report out of the Altium Designer tool. So you could see, and not even including our supplier links that are so valuable. So all of those items, literally within 25 minutes, can be done provided you have the Altium Designer software. And there was a few things that were set up previously, my snippets, of course, and the library files. But again, that is the day-to-day design. Those are constantly changing as well. But as long as you go with the flow and make use of that unified platform, I can assure you that it will increase your productivity and get your products to market much faster.